I would like to now bring up to the panel here Barry and Ron. They're going to be speaking about the, I guess, crowdfunding and beyond. Crowdfunding in EU, UK, and beyond. Take it away, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And yeah.
Great. So fantastic to be here. Yeah, we have a very much a global outlook. Unfortunately or fortunately for them, I don't know, Britain is no longer a part of the EU, so we definitely did have to broaden it just a little bit. I'll do my intro in a second or two, but it's great to see my long-time colleague, possibly the best-known name, certainly among the best-known names in crowdfunding this side of the Atlantic. And Ronald, you're going to take a little while. Would you just introduce yourself, and then I'll follow up in a minute.
Thanks, Barry, and welcome all, and thanks for this invitation. I think it's already 6 or 7 years ago when I was in the US for the first crowdfunding summit organized. I think it was in Florida. Good to be back. So my name is Ronald Kleverlaan. I'm from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Europe. Been involved in crowdfunding activities for, I think, almost 11, 12 years already by now. So it's quite a long time with experimentation in the beginning. I've been one of the founders of the European Crowdfunding Network. That's the European Association of the Crowdfunding Industry. I've been working with the European Commission on a lot of large European crowdfunding initiatives. One of them is the European Crowdfunding Service Provider regime. That's our European Jobs Act. So it makes it possible for us to raise up to €5 million throughout Europe. Excluding the UK, but the UK has you have your own structure now. And currently, I'm the director of the European Center of Alternative Finance, and that's an academic research center at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, bringing together researchers from all over Europe. So, Barry.
Great, thank you, Ronald. So I'm Barry James. I think people know generally that the UK has been a leader in crowdfunding in many ways. In fact, going back, I remember being able to break the story that London, at least at that point anyway, was the world capital of crowdfunding. It wasn't always like that. So when I'm a writer, and when I kind of entered the field, writing about this, getting on for 10 years ago, actually our regulator were trying to kill crowdfunding. They were very unhappy with the idea, and they were actually very anti-innovation. And I guess my introduction to this was really pushing back on that very hard, and in fact writing an article saying that we should do the opposite, that we should actually not just embrace crowdfunding, but embrace innovation, suggesting that actually what we should be doing is creating an innovation unit within the regulator, and having the regulator support innovation. And I know the world's changed a bit since then, thank goodness, but it took a while. But actually, that's what happened in the end after we'd did a lot of work in Parliament and so on, and that's now more the norm around the world, thank goodness. So that was kind of what got me and my team involved. These days, we do a number of things. So we collect data on crowdfunds from around the world. We now have data in the Crowd Data Center on well over 800,000 crowdfunds over the last 7 years. Absolutely, gems of data in there. And we're just moving into our second generation now, where we've got new tools that people who are thinking of crowdfunding, or people who want to know about what's happening around them in their city or the state in the USA, or to benchmark how their city is doing against other cities, can come and use those new tools to do that. And I'm hoping this is going to be useful in Europe as well, Ronald, to enable conversations with local economic development. Well, look, we have these burgeoning areas within the area, but we're not getting the support that we need. So this is where we are, and the tools that we're providing. But we're excited about the future, and we're excited about the fact that this all seems to me to be coming full circle. We started off on this journey to democratize capital and democratize funding. I'll talk about that in a few moments. But Ronald, do you want to sort of pick up the theme from your point of view? What is it that you're most excited about and working on at the moment?
Yeah, so what I think was most interesting is you were mentioning regional development agencies trying to push crowdfunding to a higher level. So one of the projects that I've been working on for the last year, together with the European Commission, was to find out how you can upscale or improve match funding through crowdfunding initiatives. So I'm not sure if the people watching here are familiar with, but the European Commission in Europe has a lot of funding, and more of the funding, investments, but even grants are not distributed by local governments, but are distributed by the European Commission. But normally these are being distributed through regional development agencies. These are public entities, and these public officers need to provide the funding to private companies. And there's a lot of mismatch there. And so what we've been looking into is how can we use crowdfunding to distribute these funds. So there are a lot of examples already. There are a lot of regional agencies on a city level, on a regional level, sometimes even on a national level, that are providing match funding, and that can be in grants, but it can also be in investments to SMEs, foundations, or other types of organizations that are looking for funding. And the advantage, of course, is that with crowdfunding, you already make kind of a selection. So the due diligence is done by the crowd or by the platform, depending on the type of model you're using. And that helps a lot with cost reduction, but it also helps a lot with, so it helps the distribution of these funds to smaller companies. So it's a much better diversification of finance, while normally the funding, especially from Europe, where there's multi-billion euro funds, you need to have a fund of a minimum 50 or 100 million euro to attract that funding, and then these investment funds will invest in larger companies most of the time. But of course, with crowdfunding, you can use it to distribute these funds to smaller minority groups, to smaller seed funding, to smaller startups, but also just to the common small business shops. And we've seen now that it is legally possible. We've created blueprints, we've created models. This report will be published next month, and it will be used by the European Commission in the next 5 years to distribute part of the European funding, and that will give a huge boost to the crowdfunding industry in Europe. So that's where I'm really excited on.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, we've got some examples, as I mentioned to you earlier, here, but not on anything like on this scale. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops both there and elsewhere. I mean, the other thing that we're seeing is a proliferation in new and innovative ways of doing different forms of capital raising and crowdfunding. Obviously, we saw the ICOs, which surged for sort of 18 months or so, and then went down again. But we're still seeing a sort of trickle of that, and it's really an exciting time. I mean, interestingly, I don't know whether you saw the stat, but crowdfunding in 2020 was up 31% globally over the previous year, which is quite quite a thing given COVID and so on. At 29% in the United States. I haven't yet looked for Europe. It'd be interesting to do that. But there's all sorts of opportunities and interesting things happening. So one of the most interesting for me is not just the crypto sphere and the implications there, but people aren't generally aware yet, but most central banks around the world, we now know, are working furiously in many cases on digital versions of their own national currency, the digital pound, the digital euro. Christine Lagarde, the president of the ECB, says is about 4 years away. So we're entering a real time of change, which will present huge opportunities across the board, including, for businesses especially, and in crowdfunding. So we're working on that. We have a project just starting. We're going to be running a campaign and a magazine called Remaking Money. You can find it at remakingmoney.com. So people who are interested in that can come and find us there. So that's kind of bringing that up to date. And I said earlier on that this is kind of all, I feel as if this conference is almost bringing us full circle. We've got the band back together with a lot of the people from the beginning. So it's fantastic to be here. Ronald, back to you. What are the things that you'd like to add, and perhaps the thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, so one final thought, and I think it will add on to what you are mentioning about the more diversification of funding. The next step of that is, of course, diversification of ownership. And while perhaps in the US it's much more common that you are raising equity funding, in mainland Europe it's not that common. Most of the funding is raised by loans, by debt. I'm not going to explain why. I've tried to do that quite a long time, and I know it's very difficult to grasp from a US perspective. But we see this coming up, and it's not about the VC type of ownership. It's about community ownership. So what we've seen coming up in several areas, in several different ways, is that different business ownership models, different investment models, and either it is through crypto, but it can also be with very old-fashioned offline activities. We've seen community ownership, either community land ownership, community shop ownership. The rise of cooperative models are giving a strong push for crowdfunding, because you see the local community wants to support their local shop, their local business, but sometimes even the local either previously public activities.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't agree more. We're seeing a real surge with that, along with a resurgence of interest in local currencies as well, to support creating those local ecosystems.
Yeah, totally. And we even see that, and in the UK, again, that's a good example, because there are specific laws giving the possibilities for community shares, for example, to have much lower barriers for raising capital for local community businesses, because there is much more trust. People know the activities and the project and the people they are investing in. So the regulator is providing a specific law with lesser regulation. So this is something that we've seen in several parts of Europe also. So that's something that I want to give back to the audience here, is that what we've seen here in Europe, and I guess that is also something with the Zebra movement in the US, is the same type of activity. I see a huge potential there for crowdfunding in the next decade, perhaps even. It's a long time. But...
Absolutely. I guess the thing I'd leave it on, I think we're going to run out of time any moment now, but the thing I'd leave it on is to say, having come that full circle, really crowdfunding was the beginning of fintech, and it's broadened and deepened, and we haven't seen the best of it yet. So it's going to be, great to see what happens, not just in the last decade, but in the next decade. Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Actually, Ronald. Barry, not so fast, because I think we have, looking at the calendar right now, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Good.
I actually wanted to ask you a few questions, so if you don't mind, both of you.
Sure.
As my accent gives it away, I'm from Eastern Europe, from St. Petersburg, Russia. And, I have some friends from Romania, I have some friends from Poland, Ukraine and Georgia are looking towards Europe as, sort of potential entrants, at least in the EU. I mean, I don't see Georgia in the EU, but Ukraine certainly has some aspirations in that way. And the same questions also apply to the Balkan countries. So, in right around 2014, 2015, when Russia was interfering in Hungary, there was conversation about two-track Europe, right? There was conversation about kind of the main track of the United Kingdom, France, Western Europe, and then kind of the later entrance post-Yugoslav wars. So I wonder about the impact of crowdfunding on those places. What does it look like there? The regulatory regimes, how are they, what does it look like?
Okay, can I answer that one, Barry?
Yeah, please.
Okay, because this is interesting, because this is something that I've been focusing on for the last couple of years. So up until now, the regulatory regimes in Europe are a mess. So you see some countries have regulation in place on a national level. Some have exemptions, trying to use existing laws, trying to bend it to use it. Some forbid crowdfunding. So mostly in Eastern Europe, it's forbidden to use crowdfunding, or it's very complicated to start a crowdfunding portal, for example. But what happened is that, and that's one of the big pushes from within the capital market union. That's the way in Europe how to create one European capital market, is that they decided to create one European crowdfunding regulation, the ECSP. And this one will get into force by the end of this year, in November of this year. And immediately it will be effective in every European country. So every member state, every of the 27 member states of Europe will use this new European regulation, and so immediately it gives companies the potential to raise up to €5 million through crowdfunding. Will they raise that 5 million in the first year? Not likely, but they have the potential to do that. Also because they can raise funding from other member states. So in Poland, it doesn't have to be Polish investors. It can also be German investors.
That's really interesting. That's fascinating.
Yes, that's really interesting, because that will create one European market. And of course, by the nature of crowdfunding, most of the people invest in projects and initiatives they know. But it gives the opportunity, of course, to raise funding from other international investors, not from US investors, but from other European investors.
That's, it feels like it's almost like consistent with the original kind of idea of the, Coal and Steel Commission after World War II, right?
Yes.
It's very consistent in that flow of capital. Like, what is it? The 4 factors that need to be flowing: ability, capital, people,
free flow of people, money.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And even more, the next step, and then that's more various activity, because with the new security regulations on tokenization, for example, on crypto, there is no. They're taking a step further and earlier than doing it on a national level. So immediately they're taking it to a European level. Barry, can you take over?
Which is fantastic. However, I do feel I would be remiss on their behalf if I didn't mention that we have two of the world's absolute leaders in the field in Crowdcube and Seeders, not to mention a whole other layer around them. And but look, this is crowdfunding. Let's work together.
Great. Well, Ron, I really appreciate the answer there. Personally, very interesting to hear. I have team members from Ukraine on the call, either in this call or on the other side, who, with them, we're speaking about kind of opening up Eastern European markets to crowdfunding. And, there is also conversations about using crowdfunding as a way of checking corruption. If you make it a political issue where you can't expropriate a public company, as FSB likes to do in Russia, it's it becomes much more difficult to do these kind of backhanded maneuvers with public equity, like public equity. All right. Well, very great pleasure to listen to you, Barry and Ron. It is time now for the Bambucorn.
Sorry, Peter,
Yeah,
can I add one, because I just forgot, for people who are interested, and especially because you mentioned you have friends in Europe. So in October, let's see it right, from October 4 to 8, we have a large event in the Netherlands. It's a Community Finance Week. And on October 5, we have an academic event from the European Center of Alternative Finance in that week. So for people who are interested, it can be very interesting, if we're allowed to travel again, to come and participate in that week, or at least in that academic event.
I would love to make it there. That'd be wonderful.
Yes.
And my final comment, much shorter, where to find that data I was talking about, the crowddatacenter.com. Thank you.
All right.
Great.
Gentlemen, thanks a lot.